So I'm really happy to introduce Daniel because Daniel is our first investment at Ant. So he was the first one to take that leap of faith. Oh, these guys sound interesting. They're doing company building. Let's see what that means. And we've actually designed a lot of what we're doing at Ant thanks to Daniel and the founders that came after him. Daniel has a very significant professional technological history coming from the intelligence corps, and we spoke about the Army and the Valley from there. I like to say that we came to work with Daniel and stayed because of his partner, Dor, which is probably one of the up and rising technological talents in Israel. And, you know, this is the target audience that we want to get, is founders that are convicted from the first meeting with Daniel. We knew what he's building, we knew his vision, and we saw that tenacity that regardless if we invest or not, he's going to be there and he's going to build an amazing company, and you see that. And ever since I've been working very closely with him, I have an excuse not to go to the office and actually go to their beautiful location in Tel Aviv. You see how he continually, as a CEO of a company, continued building, staffing, and really having that vision that he's building a company that would last, a company that is built to be successful. So I have to say that from our relationship from Daniel, I don't know if it's 50-50, but I feel like I'm learning just as much from him as he's teaching us, and it's a true privilege to have Daniel with us. Daniel.
Thank you. So thank you for that intro, and thank you, Julia, for bringing me here to that untrivial and untypical event with so many great people. And I actually want to start by following up a great question that came earlier in Liz's presentation. I think it was Darmat, if I pronounced it correctly, about how serving an IDF actually or might be helping us getting to that successful startup nation state. And I think that I was surprised by the question and immediately answered without really thinking about it, which is an important lesson in life. But then, once I've stopped talking and start thinking about it, I just realized that yesterday eve I actually had a great conversation with a couple of friends from here, discussing a bit about the shared traits of really successful entrepreneurs. And I've actually mentioned that a few months ago, I've actually wrote a LinkedIn post about it, about the fact that through my entrepreneurial journey, I actually got a chance to meet with many super successful entrepreneurs. And some were not the smartest individuals that I got to meet. Some were not the most charismatic people I actually ever met. Some didn't really came from a wealthy background. But the one shared trait that all of them had was relentlessness. And I think that serving the IDF or living in such a tiny country and having such a tiny army, but always feeling in a continuous risk to some extent, you learn an important lesson in life. Sometimes in life you should just win, no excuses. And I think that regardless of what you specifically do, that's probably the biggest lesson that you can get out of being there. So that just following up on that, and that's not going to be my topic of the conversation, even though it is an important and interesting topic to discuss about. But I am curious to hear, so out of everyone here, who actually invests capital in companies, any kind of companies? It's quite a few people. And out of you all, who actually invest in B2B companies, meaning businesses that sell to other businesses? Got it. So I have some news for all of you. Chances are that your companies completely screw up their marketing efforts. And that's because B2B marketing is broken. It's misunderstood. It's not getting its needed resources. In a few minutes, I'm going to explain you why, because of that, often marketing becomes the blocker, the bottleneck for business growth. And that should be a concern of yours. So the good news is that there is a solution, and my goal for today is for you to realize that, as well as getting some practical advice into how you can actually easily understand or assess the marketing game of your portfolio companies. But a couple of steps back, I'm Daniel. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of a company called Infinigrow. I'm 29, as you can see. I'm based in Tel Aviv, Israel, where I live with, so the picture for some reason is not here, but where I live with my soon-to-be wife, Reut, and our dog, Lichi. So over the last 4 years, I've got a chance to work with the CMOs and other marketing leaders of some of the fastest growing companies in the entire globe, working mainly on how to operationalize their marketing strategy, how to constantly make better budget decisions, and how to prove the business impact they've generated to the organization. And that's basically what we're doing at Infinigrow. So Infinigrow is a revenue marketing operating system. It's a software solution that helps B2B marketing teams to track their customer journeys through all sales and marketing interactions and business outcomes, analyze the patterns within all these journeys, to then quantify the business impact and ROI of any marketing activity, and then utilize all that data intelligence into their planning processes, allowing companies to simulate different budget scenarios, forecasting the outcomes of each, and eventually optimize their budgets accordingly. And I didn't mention that, but Roy and Lee made the job for me. So Ant Ventures and the amazing people behind it actually led our last funding round. But that just to give you some context about me. I'm not going to be very focused on Infinigrow specifically today, more to help you to finally figure out how to understand what's going on with the marketing of your portfolio companies. So let's start by dealing with one big misconception I often see people making on marketing. So marketing is not, or at least shouldn't be, that fluff function that you just need to spend money on, or just to create website traffic or leads. In fact, marketing should be an investment, a profit center, a function that aimed at creating intentional revenue growth outcomes, both for the short and long term. But most execs don't really get it. We see it in how fast CEOs fire their marketing leaders, and we see it on a qualitative level when speaking with thousands of marketing leaders. Most CEOs don't really get marketing. But who said it's a problem? Like, why should you all be caring about all of this? Well, good marketing is the experiment practice of changing people's minds and behaviors on scale and making sales easier, faster, and more efficient. But reality is a bit different. Most marketing organizations don't really have the tools in order to treat that accordingly, resulting in the average team wasting about 30% of their budget on all the wrong channels, allocations, or times. Truth is that most marketing organizations don't even think or speak like other business functions. But marketing doesn't get to define how success should look like. Business and growth do. So you may wonder why B2B marketing is so misunderstood. And for that, let's think about how a typical B2B customer journey looks like, right? From the first exposure of a prospect to a brand, all the way down to the actual revenue conversion. So it tends to take quite a long time, involve multiple stakeholders, and consists of hundreds of different touch points or interactions through all different kinds of ads, contents, trade shows, sales calls, and so on. But that makes it really, really hard to measure the correlations between marketing efforts and their bottom line impact. And although most CEOs and CFOs really care about deals, they care about revenue impact, and unlike other functions such as sales who provide clear, tangible business value, most marketing teams, old school marketers, still speak in top-of-funnel metrics, such as website traffic or leads. But that creates that internal conflict, meaning that B2B marketers always feel undercredited for their work because they cannot quantify the impact of their work, they cannot prove the business value they have generated, and they can't really trust their simplistic data analysis into understanding what should they do next, where should they double down their investments, or where should they cut their investments. And they cannot answer these core business questions coming from the company stakeholders, such as, what's going to be the revenue impact if we will add $1 million extra to your budget? But the issue is that when you can't answer this kind of question, the likelihood of you getting that extra budget is being reduced dramatically, even if you should get that extra budget, because that actually will contribute to business growth. Or in other words, companies don't really get or don't really understand the business value they're getting from marketing, and therefore they don't really understand the business value they can lose from cutting these future marketing investments. And suddenly, B2B marketing becomes the bottleneck for fulfilling the business growth potential. So the good news is that B2B marketing doesn't have to be broken anymore, now that we have this new concept called revenue marketing. And it starts with this revenue marketing mindset, which aligns marketing with the entire revenue organizations, with sales, with finance, with other business functions. It goes through setting clear revenue goals, building a strong brand which actually acts as the infrastructure for future revenue marketing and growth. And it goes all the way down to setting an operation for building growth experimentation through all different channels and activities. And marketing leaders start acting as true business leaders and acting or treating their function as an investment center. And in order to implement that, you need to set a set of processes. So it starts by having proper marketing data structure and tracking, continuously analyzing the business impact and ROI of your different investments across different channels and activities. Then you need to actually utilize that data analysis into forecasting future outcomes of different budget scenarios and continuously making better budget decisions accordingly. But in order to implement these processes, you need to have a set of tools in place. And there are different kinds of marketing tech and solutions, as you know. And for this specific problem, we're talking about 3 main types of existing solutions, starting by attribution and ROI analysis, basically technologies that allow companies to track their customer journeys through all different kinds of interactions and business outcomes, reverse engineer these journeys to then eventually being able to quantify the business impact of their past investments. Then you have the second type of solutions, which are BI solutions, basically allowing you to digest these inputs and visualize the data in a meaningful way that can actually help you answer different business questions. And the third would be marketing management or marketing budget management tools, basically spreadsheet replacement tools, tools that allows companies to get out of all the messy spreadsheets in order to better track and manage their budgets in a centralized way which is connected to the company's live data. But the issue is that even if you have the perfect combination of all these tools, it's not that you have like a couple of API endpoints, which you can simply connect and creating this feedback loop process between data analysis and budget planning. In fact, you still need to hire an internal team of data scientists and analysts to build the right models, using these models, tools, and data to pull out meaningful insights, eventually guiding the organization for what it should be doing next in order to drive its desired business outcomes. And that tends to be a very expensive, complicated, and because of its manual nature, a very flawed process. Or you can adopt this rising new type of solutions. And I'm not going to do a too aggressive promotion here, so you can imply completely by yourself what's the exact type of solution that your company should be using. And I'm not really here to talk too much about how a company can actually solve all of these problems. I'm more here to talk and helping you understand how can you utilize all of this to better understand whether your company has a winning marketing organization and how to answer the questions or how to analyze the answers you're getting from them. So let's start with the basic one, which is what's the main KPI of the team? So at the end of the day, what's marketing reporting back to the CEO and what it's being accountable for? For most teams, you're going to get answers like leads or marketing qualified leads, MQLs. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you should never use these kind of proxy indicators. You can definitely use them when making tactical decisions and when a short feedback loop is necessary. But you do need to understand that these are not real business metrics. These are proxies to what really matters, which is revenues. Now, a bit more advanced or more progressed answer you can get would be SQLs, sales qualified leads. This is usually where the marketing and sales functions have their handshake. That's when the sales function indicates that this is a good lead. This is a lead that actually has intent for a real business conversation. And this usually indicates that there is likely having a good sales and marketing alignment. But the best teams, yes, you guessed it right, would be talking about pipeline and revenues. This will basically be the core for a true revenue organization alignment. And that's what your teams should be tracking. The second question is all about whether your team is actually utilizing, in the analysis, all the relevant data that happens in the customer journey. What's the attribution model that is being used in order to analyze all that data? And for that, let's remember for a second how a typical company buys a solution. So we've said it involves multiple stakeholders, tend to take a really long time, usually 3 to 12 months, in many cases more than a year, and consists of hundreds of different touch points across all different kinds of activities. Now let's talk about the typical way of a company to analyze all that data. So a typical B2B company would go to their Salesforce CRM, going to that deals opportunity, looking at that thing called the lead source, basically analyzing what were the first interaction that supposedly led to that successful deal. Almost random, a shot in the dark. And besides being a really poor analysis, that could easily mislead you if you're actually using that analysis in your future decisions. Now, a more advanced method would be using different multi-touch models based on certain rules. The most classic example would be using a linear model, which basically evenly divides the credit between the different interactions or touch points that led to that successful deal conversion. But the best teams would be using a data-driven, a machine learning model, which dynamically adjusts the credit between all the different touch points that led to that deal based on different parameters and based on the likelihood of that journey to get converted without each one of these interactions that led to it. Third question would be how you actually analyze the metrics that you track. So regardless of whether you're using leads, sales qualified leads, or even revenues, how you're actually making sense, adding the context and understand whether it was good or bad. So the basic answer would be we're analyzing the volume of what we've generated. So for example, we've generated $2 million in revenues. But the second element would be the investment element, the cost. Because whether we got $2 million in revenues, is that a good outcome? Is that bad? I don't really know, because that really depends on how much I've invested in order to generate that. So if I invested $100K in order to generate it, yeah, sounds pretty amazing. But if I invested $20 million in order to get that, that's not really that amazing. So eventually, it all goes down to ROI, which you all obviously know because you're good investors. But the third parameter would be probably the least trivial, although one of the most important factors you can account for in marketing data analysis, and that would be speed or velocity. So you can find a different variations of that, in most classical example being time to ROI or customer acquisition payback period. But eventually, let's look about this example. I had two investments. The first had 5x ROI, while the second had 3x. Sounds like an easy conclusion, right? But in fact, what if I would be telling you that the second investment actually took 1/5 of the time in order to generate that outcome? So by the time the first investment done to generate this 5x ROI, I could reinvest that revenues again and again and get much better results. That's the power of reinvesting your money, the compound effect. A really powerful tool that most good finance people really understand, and most marketers do not really. And when using budget management, using that method, this could be a really powerful tool in order to drive real hyper growth for companies. The fourth question would be something that we've already discussed. What's the outcome we can expect for if you're going to get extra 30% of your budget or minus 30% of the budget? This could be a really, really powerful tool in order to avoid unnecessary cuts or getting the extra resources you need in order to drive the company's desired outcomes. Basically, if you ask most companies, you'll see that they're going to be completely frozen with no possible answer. Some would be able to provide you a certain estimation, but the best would be able to build a strong case by anticipating multiple scenarios based on external market conditions and likelihood of different performance your planned activities could possibly get. And the final would be, what's the percentage of company revenue that is being attributed, that it was attributed to marketing? So there are different ways in order to analyze that and get to the conclusion, but quite honestly, I'm not looking here for a specific answer. Because even if you got a low percentage, it still indicates that your marketing teams probably have the right mindset and willing to actually invest the extra effort in order to drive it up. And our key takeaways for today is that B2B marketing is broken, or at least used to be broken, and that eventually led to marketing being the blocker or the bottleneck for business growth. Second, it doesn't have to be anymore, and there is a solution called revenue marketing. And the last are some practical questions you can use to easily assess whether you have the winning marketing team and how the marketing of your portfolio companies actually going on. So that's pretty much it. Thank you for bearing with me. And if you have any question, I'm more than happy to take it.
Very good. Excellent. Let's go up on stage. Let's go up on stage. Yep. Thank you. Excellent. Listen, that's it's so relevant. So first of all, fantastic delivery, and the content's very relevant to many, many startups in the room. And so I was just sending messages to my team to make sure that they connect you into all of our portfolio companies and so forth. First question is just like, how did you figure this out?
That's a good question. Yeah, so as you can see, I have about 30 years of business experience. So I used to be a marketing director of a small cybersecurity startup.
Okay.
And back then, they had a new product they needed to release into a new market. And we hired an external agency that was supposed to build, so we have a budget that we wanted to invest, and we've hired an agency and paid decent amount of money so we can get a decent plan of how to utilize it to get to our goals. And in reality, we got a disconnected plan that my very naive idea was that I think that computers can guesstimate that better than human. Yeah?
So when I listened to you, I can't help but think of all of the agencies that are predicated. We have some really, important people that have come out of the agency world in the audience here. What is the future for businesses which are not the data-driven side of marketing? So there's marketing, which is data, and probably always has been, famous quote, don't know which part of marketing budget is working for me. And then there's the other side of marketing, which is the insight and the creativity and the power of brand and the power of distribution of a message and so forth. So are you seeing the shift really, kind of how religious are you about this, that it's just going to be about the data in the future? Or are you willing to kind of recognize that it's a bit of both, but maybe early on, this is about getting product market fit?
Thank you for this question. I just had a brief conversation with Michael here just before lunch exactly about that.
Okay.
So I'm definitely not against creative or human-driven work. Actually, part of our mission is, or at least how we're looking at it, is that we are all about enabling people focusing on what they're actually still at least doing best, which is the execution part, the creative-driven work, and basically do all the math and the data-driven work behind the scene for them. So I'm not saying that even today, obviously, there are tech everywhere, and also in the creative side of things, there are certain tools that can help humans do their work better, but I still think that we have a few more years that people actually do much better work, at least as the main strategy for driving these creatives.
How much do you think your success today has been based on your technology and how much on insight?
So insight, it's a
In
broad...
in your strategy, what you know, right? What you know, and then what you've been able to put into technology.
Sure. So I'm a big fan of technology, and I'm all about using technology and data to help people, but I'm also a big thinker that technology is eventually an enabler to drive exceptional value to your end user, to your customer. So at the end of the day, it's all about the insight, and you do need to hire the best people that can actually execute based on these insights, but I definitely think, so it's a hybrid of both, but I think it's first and foremost the users or the user-based insights, how can we solve their needs? And I'm always thinking that real expertise coming from really understanding the actual pain of the customer.
Who's your favorite company in the technology world? Who do you admire? Who would you model yourself out of after? This is, you've got Salesforce and your marketing force. Where do you look for the models?
So we are creating an infinite growth platform that's not comparable to anything else. No, I'm kidding, but I think that there are many, especially nowadays, lots of really successful companies that achieve both profits and amazing profits, as well as creating amazing cultures, empowering people. It's a good question.
Okay. Well, Forrester research really focused a lot on CMOs. They really decided to differentiate themselves away from Gartner in that respect. And George Colony, the founder, is a good friend. So let me know if you want to talk to him about that, because they would be very interested, I think, in working with you on that. Questions from the audience, please. We've got Roy over there, then we've got Rob, then we've got boom, boom, boom.
Yes, Roy.
Working, testing, 1, 2. Just because, it was an amazing talk, but you didn't really talk about Infinigrow specifically. Can you share a little bit about, Infinigrow, USP, and kind of where do you vision the company going?
Yep.
Sure. So at the end of the day, we're here for doing two main things. So A is helping B2B companies building their revenue growth engines, which are measurable, predictable, and scalable, by automating the process between data analysis and budget planning and creating that into a unified iterative process. And second would be to fix two of the toughest, or if you want to be a bit less politically correct, two of the most toxic relationships in B2B companies, which are marketing and sales and marketing and finance. And as you know, eventually our vision goes even beyond marketing. It's going for the entire revenue organization that I actually believe will have some variation of a unified organization. sometime soon.
Can we take Rob, please? Yep.
Yeah, sure. Fascinating insights, and with a marketing background myself, very, very relevant.
Thank you.
A couple of questions I've got. First is, how do you suggest businesses can engender that commercial mindset from a marketing team? Because often, as you said, first slide, fluff, like in generating leads, but how do you really generate and engender that commercial mindset?
So as mentioned, I think that it's coming from three main layers or pieces. First is the mindset, you have the processes, and you have the tools in order to implement this accordingly. So first, like the first part would be actually understanding all of this. And I think that the first step would actually be aligning for true accountability for for revenues, and not just thinking about your specific piece in that funnel. Because in a very different analogy, recently I had a lot of research about how can you actually measure R&D, right? Because it's really disconnected from what you do. And at the end of the day, when interviewing a lot of people, especially from Google and from Facebook and companies like that, they've actually transitioned the way they work and creating these kind of squads, which I'm not going to expand about too much, but basically saying that regardless of what you specifically do in the product development process, whether it's designing, defining the product, or actually executing it, writing code, you should all have one specific goal. And it's exactly like a football team. So the striker is not the only person who should score goals or should be accountable for scoring goals, or the defender should not be the only person who should be blamed for getting goals. It's a team sport, and you should all go for the same one shared goal.
Perfect. Everyone knows the number. Everyone knows the number. One final question is,
Sure.
do you find that smaller businesses are better at this than bigger businesses because of the lack of funds and the need to really spend them wisely?
It's a good question. Honestly, when I've started initially and I have this super naive idea, my initial goal was to do that for like tiniest businesses, right? And when started interviewing, and I think that for the first year, I've interviewed more than 100 marketing leaders of all different sizes and types of companies, I saw that the problem, the pain was definitely there for these kind of businesses, but I realized that this pain actually existed anywhere in the landscape. So I think that smaller businesses care more about each of the dollar they're investing. So to some extent, yes. Even though for the larger organization, the same percentage could account for much more absolute numbers. I think that smaller companies have one advantage, which is probably be more agile, which is harder for large companies. So it depends on the small business. On an average, probably no. But good small businesses have easier life to do so because of that.
Excellent. Okay, we have Jonas. Yep, got the microphone there. Perfect. Introduce yourself, please.
Yes. I represent Eurobank Private Banking with Mr. Makri Dimitris.
Nice to meet you.
First of all, it was a great speech. Well
Thank
done. How to quantify the impact of marketing in our bank was always a very, very big question mark. So I saw that in the third, as I noted, the parameters that you said was about effectiveness, efficiency, and speed. One of something that worries us a lot is about the timeliness of the clientele. I mean that when a client onboarding from an action plan, a marketing plan, it might be onboarding with a high speed, with a lot of effectiveness, a lot of efficiency, but how can we know? Is in your model something that can show us that this relationship is not a firework, it's gonna stand in a lot of years? Are there parameters that you can fix together in order to have that delivered? Or is it something that it grows with the plan?
Can you please repeat the last part of the question?
Yes, if we can together put the factors of your model, or the model is tailor-made only from you, about the factor and the parameters that you put on it with your customer.
So I couldn't fully hear the exact question. I'm sorry
There's
for
a little
that.
bit of background noise. Just
No,
say it real
excuse
succinctly.
me.
Yeah.
Oh,
Your
yes.
model, your platform, the parameters that you are using in order to analyze data, is by you or is correlated with your customer? I mean, if I want to put some more factors.
So it's not that only 3 metrics. It's just different 3 main. You can see it as kind of perspectives of how you're analyzing the results of or the different numbers. So you have many different metrics that you can use using that approach. Can you give me maybe an example of a different angle, and then I'll be able to...
Yes, of course. You might need, for example, the clientele with some specific characteristics, or the sales in some specific time periods, or the profits, whatever. It's something that you can change it when your client wants it, because I don't want to measure how the client is in 1 year with me. I want to measure it about the next 3 years or next 5 years in my model. Is that something that you can deliver?
Yeah, so you can actually define both long-term and short-term goals of exactly what you're looking to hit in both.
Because we are looking long-term,
those 2
that's why it's not a product.
Of course.
Banking, it's not a product.
I think
one
it's
shot.
only about balancing between these short-term and long-term goals.
Right. All right. Thanks a lot.
Excellent. Listen, we've got to leave it there because we've got to stay on track. Daniel, thank you so much. It was outstanding. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. We're looking forward to working with you.
Me too.
I encourage you to also speak, if you haven't already, with Tim Shields. Tim's in the blue shirt, Scott Fulton, Judita, so that we can really get your Infinigrow platform out to all of our portfolio companies. And we'll be continuing to promote you online with your ideas because I think they're super relevant and we want to help get that message out there. Thank you so much.
Sounds
my
like a
friend.
plan. Thank you.
You bet. Absolutely.